Good morning, good afternoon and good evening, my dear brothers and sisters. Welcome once again to Q&A, question and answer session from the General Conference. Today too we have Sister Raquel with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming over here, Sister. And we are having the continuation of the subject we were talking about last week. It's on war and pacifism in the New Testament. We are dealing with the questions related with the New Testament, and as I mentioned last time, that there are some continuation of questions, and we like to encourage you to send more questions because we will be having one more session of under this topic next week. So before we begin our program today, let us have a word of prayer and asking God to help us to understand this subject well. Let's pray. Our most loving, gracious Father in heaven, we thank you, Father, for this moment thou hast given us. Lord, thank you for helping us, Father, to understand the deep meanings of the Bible and testimony. Lord, continue to bless us with thy wisdom, and we pray especially for Sister Raquel, who is helping us to have better understanding of this subject, Father, and fill her with thy Holy Spirit and thy wisdom, and help us also to understand with thy help. All these mercies and pardon for our sins we ask in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
As usual, Sister Raquel, are you ready to answer the questions?
With the help of the Lord, it's possible, yes.
Yeah. It is a heavy subject, I could say, beyond what we were thinking of, because, and also this is the basic, this subject is also one of the basic questions, like we need to find answers in our life, because many ways, when it going into many directions, and for us to understand the plan of salvation, to understand God better, I think this subject is helping us.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
Yes. And okay, let's go to the our first question, that which we continuing from last week, and the question is the Buddhists who are very strict vegetarians, general Buddhists, I could say, because not the people who are saying they are Buddhists but they are not vegetarians. No, but we are saying the general Buddhists, vegetarians who claim that in the commandment, thou shalt not kill, it includes also animals, they say, because it is dealing with humans. Humans, it should be read as thou shalt not murder. And could you explain that, Sister? So this is a question we received.
Yes, that is part of the Ten Commandments, and it's very interesting, as we have mentioned in the past session, that we always consider the historical context, the moment in time, location, where these declarations were done. So we believe in the Ten Commandments in the literal concept of it. And by this time, parallel to the proclamation of the Ten Commandments, also the completely worship and sacrificial system was established. And it's very interesting that was including the sacrifice of animals, because they represented the prototype of the Messiah to come, Jesus Christ, as the only one that atoned our sins and make possible for us salvation. Okay, so in this specific context, as the transition between Judaism and Christianity, we need to understand this specific context. When I spoke in the past with several Buddhist friends of mine, that was one of the accusations.
Yes, actually,
and say,
yes.
Okay, good. We are very happy that your denomination, for example, don't go to war or don't participate in anything connected with these kind of activities. But okay, what about other circumstances? So I refer them to the Holy Scriptures in the two covenants that we have. We have the Old Testament and we have the New Testament. And these are different dispensations. And in this context, we need to understand that.
Okay, that is a reason that we have this here.
Yes.
And because as you said that, even I have a lot of friends and they used to say that, okay, your Old Testament is full of blood, they say.
Yes.
And animals and as well as humans. So this is
Right.
one of the accusations. Actually, the Buddhism is a religion supposed to be peaceful religion.
Theoretically.
Yes.
Yes.
That's why I say supposed to be.
Yeah.
So, and because it's more than a religion, it's a philosophy.
Yeah.
So they agree with that. I mean, Buddhists also, they agree that.
Yeah, generally they are very open. So because they don't depend on a specific organization, it's more a lifestyle, as you say, like a philosophy. But it's important for us to have answer to these questions.
Yes.
And therefore we emphasize the fact that we need to consider always time and place and prophetical frame of this specific period in order to have the correct understanding and interpretation of the scriptures.
Yeah. I received another oral question from another brother from last week. We were talking about the gap we had about 400 years between John the Baptist and Prophet Malachi.
Right.
And they were asking, so whether the kingdom of Israel chosen by God destroyed or terminated with Malachi or John the Baptist?
Okay, that is a very important question. Generally, because we have this period of time undescribed and generally undefined. So here is the thing. From the moment on that the last king was deposed from the Babylonian Empire, was no more king from the line of David. Never, ever. What this means is that when they returned, they were already under the Medo-Persian Empire.
Yes.
And they never was a kingdom. They were a province from the Medo-Persian Empire. So according to the Bible, we know Zerubbabel was the first governor. And it's very interesting because Cyrus knew how important is the lineage in the among the Israelite people. So Zerubbabel was from the king line, was from the descendants of David, but he was never a king. He was only governor. Then we find Nehemiah, and he was the next governor.
Yes.
Okay. And from this moment on, never is a kingdom, never is an independent province, because when the Medo-Persians were conquered by the Greeks, Alexander the Great, again, when you conquer an empire, the new empire established the annexation of the former territories that they have. So the province of Judah remained the province of Judah, now under the leadership of Alexander the Great. Now, Alexander the Great died, and we know the distribution of the 4 generals. So the province of Judea was originally under the Seleucid monarchy. So Seleucid created a dynastic line, the Seleucid kings. So we have Ptolemy in Egypt, and they created the Ptolemon line. So this province of Judea as an intermediate region, that was between the Seleucid dynastic line and the Ptolemean dynastic line, intermittently. Okay. And that was the Hellenistic period. Again, they were no kings, they were governors. Now, in the process of transition between the Seleucids and the Ptolemies, we have an uprising in the province Judea, and then we have the Maccabeans.
Yes.
The Maccabeans established a very short kingdom, and they declared themselves independent. So that was completely illusory, because never really was not recognized, and they don't even have the opportunity to become a kingdom. They were absorbed by the Seleucids and after the Ptolemies. So after they were conquered by the Roman Empire, and we know that the 70 weeks expired under the administration of the Roman Empire. So during all these 400 years, they were under different empires, but they never ever become a kingdom. Some people can ask, what about King Herod? Yeah, King Herod was established as a puppet king from the Roman Empire, and he was not even a Jew originally. Okay, so he was from the descendants of Esau, and he converted to Judaism in order to please now the new territories that he needed to administrate it. But he was never recognized by the Jews as a king, because they knew exactly, have nothing to do with no one of the tribes of the Jews, and even less from Judah.
Yeah, so that is very clear.
Yes.
So that is why I think that it is much obvious that the Israelites wanted to establish a kingdom, and they were trying to use Messiah.
Right. Yes.
So they were waiting for Messiah to come and establish the kingdom.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So we understand. I think the brother who asked the question would have got the answer now. Okay, we go to the next question.
Yes.
And what is the meaning of the words of Jesus, love your enemies? We deal with this in the New Testament. We don't see that much in the Old Testament. This particular term or the concept we find in the New Testament, but we don't find that much in the Old Testament. Why was this different?
Yeah, the difference, if we consider the last part of our first session, we make a difference between who were enemies and who were neighbors. So in Deuteronomy 20, we find the definition of these three main groups. The ones that were relatives, like the Edomites, for example, the ones that belong to the 7 main tribes as settled in Canaan, and then the more distant cities. And we know that for all 3 categories, the regulations were different. And that is very significant for us, what they really consider enemies. So according to the reference, when we put together Genesis 15, together with Deuteronomy 20, we know exactly the list of the tribes that are mentioned there. And the Lord say they cannot stay among you, because they will convert you to their worship, to their practices. And the measure of grace is over for them. So they were enemies. But for example, if you consider that was to be observed as a collectivity, as a corporative region. But we have even exceptions. We have Rahab, for example. She was a Canaanite. She was in the list from the people that need to disappear because of their corruption and abominations in front of God. Yes. But which is the difference? Conversion. Then she even is now included in the ancestry of Jesus Christ himself. Then we have the example of the Gabaonites.
Yes.
In Joshua chapter 9. So they lie, but the Lord say, okay, you need to keep your promise, because you swore to them. And they were very nearby. But they submitted completely, and they really converted.
Yes.
And God considered them part of his people, because when Saul exterminated part of the Gabaonites, God said to David, you need to avenge them, because that was unfair. And mention is Gabaonites, but is part of our people. So we see that was not a drastic measure without exceptions. So the exceptions always depend on submission, acceptance, conversion, and integration.
Okay, that's correct, because that's what we are being expected. So I have more questions on this subject, sister. Okay, I'll go to one more question, and then we'll go to the PowerPoint.
Okay.
And once again in the book of Revelation, it speaks about war and destruction of the enemies. Why this is going to take place in the book of Revelation?
Right. Yeah. The closing of the book is a clear extermination of sin and evil. And that is the thing. When we connected Revelation, the four last chapters together with Genesis, then we go to the a starting point of our presentation. So war have to do with the existence of sin and falling sin in this specific planet. So the end, conclusive action of God is to completely extermination of sin. And with sin is included pain, sorrow, sicknesses, and death. And this is no more. And it's interesting that Revelation say that is the new order of things. Everything is new now. It's new heaven and it's new earth. And God himself would execute judgment.
Yes.
Because everybody is judged. And that is interesting because God don't eliminated sin in an indiscriminated form. Because when the saints are 1,000 years in heaven, they are working actively and pronounce the sentences for every single human being that will be not saved, but God say, okay, because they are not saved, okay, let all of them must die. No. Everybody according to the works that they have done.
Yes.
And God performed personally this action. So that is part of the extermination of evil and sin on earth.
Yeah, that's a good explanation you gave. Now, that is why we find that in the book of Revelation is talking about kingdom and re-establishing the kingdom.
Right.
And the same way in the book of Genesis.
Yes.
Like, both ways, but in between the Gospels is talking about, not about a kingdom, it's talking only about the kingdom in heaven.
Is that
so
is
the
correct.
heavenly kingdom
Yes.
talks about that. I think we need to keep that in mind, that Jesus came to preach about that kingdom.
New kingdom, yes.
The new kingdom. He came to preach about that. But
yes.
ultimately he had to lose his life on earth because
Yeah.
we try to understand that there. I think let's go to the PowerPoint presentation, sister, then we
Yes.
might have more questions on that. Yes.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very fascinating subject. So today, as promised, we are going to introduce ourselves in a new period, in another section of the Holy Scriptures. Our subject is the same, war and pacifism, but now we are considering the New Testament. And before that, we want to establish a transitional period between the Old and the New Testament. In fact, the historical context was already presented. But now let us use the same background concepts, the way how we close our past one. So Ecclesiastes 3:8 speaks to us about a time for war. That is Old Testament. And now we are a time for peace. And if you remember, we consider three main categories that underline the exclusivity of Israel and after Judah as a nation. Let us see how was the prophetical background for this situation. Let us go first to the concept of nation. Jeremiah 13:18 is a very crucial prophecy related with the crown and the monarchy as large. Say to the king and the queen mother, take a lowly seat, for your beautiful crown has come down from your head. So this declaration of Jeremiah 13 that announced in a regular and permanent way the three deportations and the final devastation even of the temple, the walls, the gates, and the entire city was connected also with the elimination of the monarchy. So the crown has come down. So this concept of nation is no more as a political structure to be considered. The second element that we have studied is 2 Chronicles 36 verse 20 and is related with territory. If you remember, according to Genesis 15, this will be from the river Nile to the river Euphrates, from Egypt until the border with Syria. Now let us see how was after the crown has been put down. Those who had escaped from the sword, he carried away to Babylon, and they were servants to him and to his sons under the rule of the kingdom of Persia. So they become captives. First of all, they lose their freedom and capability of decision, and after they become a province with certain autonomy under the Persian Empire. They never ever become a kingdom again, and even less a nation. What about army that was needed to defend borders, to establish sovereignty of the territory? And it's very interesting because 2 Corinthians 10:4 establish a very important statement. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. So the fact that they don't have a monarchy and the fact that they don't have a territory army is irrelevant, because this depends on the presence and the defense of the empires where they were submitted to. And here, and it's very significant, the Lord made a clear difference between the weapons of the world and the weapons of divine power. And this is what we are going to consider now. So let us see about something very significant that have to do with the tribes distribution in the genealogical ancestry as a transition. For example, when we read in Numbers chapter 1, verses 45 and 47 through 50, we find something very, very significant. We have at least 2 censuses after coming out of Egypt and before coming into Canaan. And the census was considered only to count males ready to be part of the army. And that was very significant by this period of time. Now, was a tribe that was exempt to go to war or to participate as soldiers in the war. And therefore, they were not counted among the males ready to be part of the army. And they were the Levites. So they were not numbered in order to be part of this census. That is very significant for us, because when we move to the New Testament, we find 1 Peter 2:9, and the church of God, the faithful ones, are defined as chosen generation, royal priesthood, holy nation, and a peculiar people. So that transitional element is very, very significant, because now the role and the presence and service performed by the Levites in general, in particular by the priest family, was transferred now to a more extended and collective generation and multicultural people. Now, again, the prophetical background is very significant here, because we have here the 70 weeks prophecy that pointed to the coming of Jesus and the end of Israel as the chosen and exclusive people. So we wish to consider, especially from year 457 BCE, when they returned from Babylon, and the 3 decrees were given for rebuild the city, the temple, and the walls, until the beginning of the ministry of Jesus Christ. Again, we have this 3.5 weeks or 3.5 years until the cross, the 3.5 years of ministry of Jesus from baptism, from Jordan to Calvary. And then we have still other 3.5 years that lead from the cross to the end of the prophetical period of Israel as the exclusive people of God. And then from this moment is an open door, even before they were introductory elements, but is the open door to the gospel to the Gentiles in year 34 AD. And that is extremely important for us to understand because it's a completely different perspective. For example, when we read in Ezra 9, verse 1 and 2, and Ezra remind the people why they went into the captivity, why they lose the crown, why they lose territory, why they lose independence. Here again, we find these main enemies like the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, and so forth. And the Lord still explained to them, mingle the holy race with the people around them was one of the main reasons of this disturbance in their purpose. Now, when we compare that with the new dispensation in Ephesians 2:14, we find something very important for us. Say, for Christ himself has brought us peace by making Jews and Gentiles one people. With his own body, he broke down the wall that separated them and kept them enemies. And that is very significant because these enemies that were the main group of religions and people settling in the territory of Palestine, today Canaan, before, now by the death of Christ in the cross and the death of Stephen, we find here clearly that the Lord said now is one people, and these are no more your enemies. So you are one because there is broken down the wall that separated friends and enemies, and now is a people. So this new concept is extremely, extremely important in the New Testament. That changed completely the way how they related or associated with nearby neighbors.
Yes, we can see in this picture that you know in BC 457, that we all know that 70 weeks prophecy.
Yeah.
During the whole of 70 weeks prophecy, we did not find a king or a kingdom.
Yes.
So the king to come is Messiah.
Absolutely.
So that's why the Israelites were looking forward to have that kingdom, the earthly kingdom. But Messiah's mission is not to establish the earthly kingdom, but the kingdom of, the heavenly kingdom, to represent here a representative from that, just to show how then he demonstrated that among the public.
Yes.
Among the public, that how that kingdom is going to be.
Exactly.
So I think this is a simplicity of Christianity.
Yes.
Beautifully arranged and beautifully presented. Unfortunately, we are not understanding it in full.
The wisdom and providence of God created this disturbing situation after they lose their country as intermediated situation, and that is exactly the 70 weeks that have this purpose. They never become a nation again, they never have a monarchy anymore, and they were subdued all the time under empires or other power of nations around them. But unfortunately they didn't accept the purpose of the Lord, and they wanted war and they wanted destruction. And therefore, Jesus didn't match the understanding how supposed to be. But that was not the plan of salvation.
No, not at all. But by punishing Jesus, the Messiah, I think they paid the price as well. During the time of the Jerusalem's destruction, and in between the crucifixion and destruction, a lot of things took place, and they, it was basically a siege.
Yes.
And by Romans.
Yeah. In year 70, 1 million people died inside of the city.
Yes.
And all the rest of the people were sold as slaves.
Yes.
So Jerusalem was completely devastated. Population perspective and building and temple is done.
So we can understand the consequence of all. Actually, they decided that. That is their choice.
They pronounce and say, this blood came upon us and the children and our children.
Yes.
So that
they
was
invited
self-prophecy.
They invited that.
Unfortunately.
Onto them.
Yes.
So I think these are all what we are discussing is a huge, a very important lesson for our life.
Yes.
So do you have more in the slide? Yes, let's go. Yes, sister, yes.
Yeah, as I have mentioned, that is only a transitional aspect on it. So let us begin with John the Baptist, okay? We covered this intermediated period. Let us go about the position of John the Baptist toward war, soldiers, or violence in general, because sometimes we pass by these important statements. So when we read Luke 3:14, in general, the two former verses are people that approach John the Baptist coming to the Jordan to be baptized and asking, for example, tax collectors, even priests and Pharisees, asking what to do, how we can be saved, what kind of elements we need to bring forth to be baptized and receive forgiveness and salvation. So we are not going to these details. We are considering only the question of the soldiers, because these have to do with our subject. So soldiers approach, and something we need to understand. All these soldiers were Romans. They were Gentile people, okay? So because the Jews didn't have soldiers, they don't have an army, because they were under the dominion, protection, and completely subdued to the Roman Empire. So they don't have army. When we speak about these soldiers, we are speaking about Roman soldiers. So they approach John the Baptist, and let us see what the question was. Soldiers also asked him, and we, what should we do? So from the message of John the Baptist, these Gentile people realized, okay, they are not in good terms with God. So the way how they behave or the profession that they develop is not in order. So the question comes, what should we do? Let us see the regulation that is a triple one that John the Baptist presented and say, do violence to no man, neither accuse any falsely, and be content with your wages. So we have here three elements that they needed to regulate. So the first one is do not inflict violence on anyone. And this means you don't intimidate others, you don't treat with violence. Mm-hmm. The second one is do not make false charges against people in order to defraud them or somehow disturb them in the safety of peace. And the third one is not using your power or your authority to extort others, asking money or possessions, but you need to be content with your allotment. This needs to be enough. When we put these three categories together, with other words, you cannot be a soldier. Yeah, that is the message. Because when you consider in detail the three elements here, regulation that was presented, so a soldier exists to inflict violence or control violence with violence. Or even his presence is already a threat towards somebody that plans to exercise any kind of violence. It's normal by a period of when a territory or a nation is invaded that the occupiers implement violence and extortion and abuse of any kind. Mm-hmm. So that was part to be a soldier. Yes. Because only to be a soldier, a Roman soldier in a territory that is subdued of the Roman Empire, you are superior. And if we consider these three, the answer was, you cannot be a soldier. That's it. Because all these attributes are proper for a soldier. So that is very significant. And now we want to see if this presentation of the new way of dispensation was also confirmed by Jesus Christ, because he was the one that prepared the way for him. So we find a chapter in the Bible, and it is Matthew chapter 5, Matthew 5. And there is the Sermon on the Mount. And you see here in the picture 7 attributes of pacifism. And the one is, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. So pacifism as a broad concept are developed in the small details in the next 6 main categories. So, whoever practices and teaches the commandments will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. No more kingdom of earth, no more kings, no more crown, no more army, no more territory. We are elevated to another dimension, and the Lord presented is a kingdom, that is right, but is not from this earth. So, third category, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. So the third element is no murder, and is no exception here presented. This is an element to be judged, and under no circumstances justification is given. Let us go to number 4 in verse 22. We are always in Matthew chapter 5. I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. So not only that you physically damage somebody and bring it to death, but here is about emotional violence. So
Yes.
when we show anger, when we look in a very insidious way to somebody, that is emotional violence. It's no words, but the people feel threatened and hurt. So even here is included in number 4, the emotional violence. Let us go to verbal violence.
Yeah.
And we are always in Matthew 5 and say, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court, and anyone who says you fool will be in danger of the fire of hell. So here is verbal violence. So you are not to practice violence even by looking or expressing any emotions, but even by saying you are stupid will be a modern word for raka or fool. You are stupid, you are an idiot. People say it very easily. Okay, for God that is unacceptable, and it's even further because say will be in danger of the fire of hell. So we don't have the right under no circumstances to devaluate an individual. And here is clear, no verbal violence. Let us go to number 6. I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. So no physical violence. We have emotional violence, no. Verbal violence, no. And physical violence under no circumstances. And the other point that we already mentioned in the questions and partially already answered is number 7, and say, I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. So again, it's a completely change of perspective in the Sermon on the Mount.
Yes, so it is very, very obvious. I think we learn much more than what we can see.
Exactly.
In the words.
Yes.
Because everything what Jesus said has meaning, and it is almost very prophetic as well.
It have transcendency. It's not
Yes.
only for these specific circumstances, it's timeless.
No, so it's timeless actually. That is a
Yes.
correct word we should say. So you have more on that, sister? Yes, let's go on with that, because we are learning a lot on that.
Yeah, if Jesus began his ministry when these 7 clear precepts related with pacifism,
Yes.
let us see how these 7 principles were also implemented in Jesus' attributes in his life, how that was. And it's extremely important that, for example, the prophecy in Isaiah 9:6, one of the attributes of Jesus was Prince of Peace. Again, we have pacifism. then is saying to us, Jesus himself answered to Pilate in John 18 verse 36 and say, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants will have been fighting for me.
Yeah.
So here is a clear distinction of dimensions. So on earth, no kingdom from God, no kingdom for his people. So the kingdom of heaven is from God and is not from this earth. And here in this statement, again, Jesus presents himself as part of this kingdom that is not from the world, but is in heaven. Let us go to the same concept of no murder. Put your sword back into its place, for all of those who take up the sword shall perish by the sword. And that is a very significant moment in the general plan of salvation, because people come in the night to arrest Jesus. And we know that was a prophecy related to that, he will be taken and considered among delinquent people by the fact that people among his friends and close people, they were with weapons. And Jesus before that say, take your weapon in order to fulfill this prophecy.
Yes.
And that is very significant. But now the action of defense and the act of rejecting the arrest is contrary to the plan of salvation. So we cannot resist evil, as was mentioned in the Sermon on the Mount. And the plan of salvation is connected with violence that is done from the kingdom on earth toward the kingdom of heaven. And God don't accept any of these actions. Considering non-emotional violence, we continue. Jesus said, do not be afraid of those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. And that is very significant. He said, you are going to be persecuted and you will be killed. But here is the thing, they cannot kill your conscience, your thoughts, your belief, your values. So emotional violence can be implemented, but by Christianity, this can be neutralized. Let us go to the next point. If I say something wrong, and that is Jesus answered the high priest, Jesus replied, testify as to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me? So he suffered physical violence, and he questioned, which is the fairness to apply even verbal violence when they cannot prove that something wrong was said from his side. Another confirmation of these 7 principles about no physical violence say, I have told you all this so that you may find peace in me. In the world you will have trouble, but be brave. I have conquered the world. So Jesus clearly announced several times that physical aggression is going to happen to the faithful ones. And the Lord said, you need to resist this. You need to find peace in me, because the world is not going to give you peace. And again, he confirmed this concept, love to enemies, by extended even this idea, saying, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. This means in equal extension and dimension. So we see it's no difference whatsoever between the 7 principles of the Mount of Blessing and the attributes of Jesus. Let us see how that was implemented, and we will mention only 3 apostles of Jesus. For example, James. James was the one and the first that was arrested, persecuted, and put to death with the sword. And in Acts 12, 1 and 2, we can the completely description of that. What about Peter? Peter will be not decapitated, as James was, but that he was crucified. And that is very interesting, because in John 21, verse 18 and 19 is clearly presented, they will stretch out your hands. Okay, that is a clear presentation of crucifixion form. And someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. And the Bible text says that indicate the way how he is going to die. So Peter was crucified and died also, even much later. James was the first one. And then let us go to Paul. Paul describes and write to the second letter to Timothy that he's willing and able to be offered. And we know he was decapitated as a Roman citizen. So we see here no resistance, no
exemptions.
No exceptions. They give their life and they never, under no circumstances, implement any kind of violence, not even self-defense.
Okay, that comes to another question from me. Okay, I'll ask this question from you. Okay, now today we as Christians are never to participate in wars. Okay, what are the extended limits on this term? That means, can't we comment or support any party involved in war?
Okay, war is a concept, as we have defined, that is parallel to sin. And the word is enmity. If you remember Genesis 3:15, immediately after the fallen sin of Adam and Eve, was presented by God clearly. So this conflict is coming to an end, and God is the one that will finish it completely. But that is not our attribute. What we need to do is living the 7 elements of the Mount of the Sermon of the Mount that Jesus has presented. That is our life. That was the life of Jesus. That was the life of the apostles. And the Lord gives us an armor. Okay, so He don't leave us without protection or defense. And that is our next slide here, very, very significant. And it's a very well-known concept that we find here, and it's about the armor of God. So He didn't leave us without possibility of defense. But which are these defense? The truth, the righteousness, the gospel, the faith, the salvation, and the word of God. And all that is against evil. That is our armor. And we know from Ephesians 6:11 to 17 that these 7 pieces of the armor, the belt, the breastplate, the sandals, the shield, the helmet, and the sword, all of them is our equipment. And that is the weaponry that we are allowed to use. Nothing else in any case. No association with people connected with war, not indirectly have any relationship with war activities, and even less direct action. Because here is clear that the call for the people of God is the war against the evil, and that is invisible power, principles of the darkness. It's not people, it's not nation, it's not institution, it's not government. Is again evil. And with evil, the contrast with them is the principles of heaven, with the truth, with the righteousness, with the gospel, with the faith, with the salvation, and the word of God. Because our war is a spiritual one.
Yes.
And yes.
Now, okay, we are talking about the spiritual ones, and some people asking the questions, okay, why this in detail this is being mentioned in detail, because apostles mentioning that, okay, the breastplate to the all the coverings, the helmets, to everything in description. So that means they find that they're comfortable, so there's nothing wrong in wearing these kind of things and going to war, something like that. But you mentioned that, not even by thought, not even by word, we should not participate in any kind of war. Because there is no such thing called good sins and bad sins.
It's sin, that's it.
Sin is a sin. And so we need to be very, very careful. When the war comes, that as you mentioned, that the 3 elements that the soldiers are involved, I mean, they have criteria to fulfill. So that is not easy, but we need to be very careful before even commenting, before even thinking that we need to be careful with that.
Absolutely. So, this world is not our world. That is not our kingdom. That is not our place. Therefore, our weaponry is the spiritual one that is presented as the armor of God according to Ephesians chapter 6.
Yes, amen. So that is what we need to keep that in mind. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
Yeah, I will try to be so briefly as possible.
Okay.
So we will consider now the 7 churches in perspective, because we began with Genesis and we want to close this Bible perspective with the Old and the New Testament. So you have here in clear line the 7 churches, or the 7 period of Christianity according to prophetical view. So what is very significant in all of them is that always the faithful one suffer for the truth. In no one of them you see that they have the right to intervene, to be hostile, or in any way implement aggression toward the enemies. In no circumstances. Let us see very shortly some of these elements. We know Ephesus is the beginning of the period of the early church or the apostolic church. Laodicea is the last period of the history of the people of God, is the church of the judgment. So I will not go in detail for every one of the churches or periods, because it's not a historical background, but what we want to emphasize here is the way how the attitude of the faithful ones in this approximately 2,000 years supposed to be. So Ephesus, you have persevered and have endured hardship for my name and have no grown worry. So hardship is part of the faithful ones, because that is produced by the evil against the good. In the case of Smyrna, it's even a prophecy for the 10 days of the 10 years intensive persecution during Diocletian especially, and say clearly, do not be afraid of what you are about to suffer. I tell you, the devil will put some of you in prison to test you, and you will suffer persecution for 10 days. Be faithful even to the point of death. So martyrdom is even presented here. We are under the Roman Empire, Ephesus and Smyrna, and by this period of time, people of God were completely against any element of violence. I have not included in the New Testament the period of the writings of the first fathers, that we will see somebody that was a soldier cannot be member of the church. Okay, I think this will be another period, so I cover only the biblical one at this point. So when we are in Pergamos, a very problematic and devious situation, again, is saying, you did not renounce your faith in me, not even in the days of Antipas, my faithful witness, who was put to death in your city where Satan lives. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we can hear the completely development of papacy by this time. And again, is killing, is persecution, is affliction, and martyrdom. Let us go to Thyatira. Again, we find here that I will not impose any other burden on you except to hold on to what you have until I come. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the truth is the element that need to identify you so that I recognize you when I come. Let us go to Sardis, where period, Thyatira, Sardis, Reformation period. Remember therefore what you have received and heard, hold it fast. All the time is the perseverance, the defense of the truth. Philadelphia, again, be good courage and keep the word that was given to you. In Laodicea, Jesus said, I am here, I am from the door. So you open the door and you have relationship with me. So during this perspective of these 2,000 years in advance that John saw in vision, is no war, no intervention of any issues of the earthly kingdom. And the end of it is the coming of Jesus Christ. And then let us see which elements are presented here in Revelation 21 verse 4. And again, we have 7 attributes here. So the first one is a new earth. So this earth, as we see it now, is going to cease existence. And the Lord said, wipe every tear. That is the second element. So in a state of tears will be love, will be happiness. Number 3, no more death. So life will be the only option of existence. Number 4, no sorrow, joy. No cry, by comfort. No pain, by well-being. And that is very significant. Number 7 is old order has passed. Now we are in a new order. How is defined this new order? And let us connect it with the New Testament. And that is Isaiah 2:4 that say, nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. That is the new kingdom. That is the new earth.
Okay, so amen. So that is what we are looking forward to go, and God, Jesus Himself is going to fight the final battle and give us a peaceful kingdom.
Amen.
So that is what we are looking forward. And let's go to the next. You have a next slide?
No, that is
closing with that element. Okay.
Yeah.
Now then, I present to you another one more question that we may find the answers next week. Okay, so this is about, in the Old Testament, capital punishment was recommended.
Yes.
And in the New Testament, we do not see the gospel in this direction.
No.
Okay, what is the reason for this change? So they're asking. And this I like to relate that, the contemporary questions that, going to work or obligatory military service, and things we will be discussing next week.
Yes, but let us answer the first part about the capital punishment. So here is the thing, again, the historical context. So in the Old Testament, we have a nation with a government, with a judicial system. Nobody was killed only because, let us kill somebody. So needed to be proofs, needed to be a correct court procedure in order to establish a sentence. But they have the absolutely authority based on the Torah, on the 5 books of Moses, to do so. And the priests have a very significant role and word by this procedure. Now, immediately after the deportation, first the disappearing of the 10 tribes of the north, and then the carrying away of the captives from the other 2 tribes to Babylon. And when they returned, they never have the right for the capital punishment because they never were again an independent nation. And that is the reason why, in the case of Jesus, even if they condemned them in the Sanhedrin, they needed to bring him to Pilate because he is the governor of the Roman Empire in this province, and he needed to confirm or rejected this appeal.
Correct.
But Pilate don't wanted to mix up on that, so they sent it to the king.
Yes.
So the king had also the right. But the Sanhedrin and the Jewish organizatorical structure was unable because they were not a nation.
Okay, that makes sense. Actually, we understand that concept now. So that is an advantage we have, that we need to understand that the difference between where the Israelites were having a kingdom, where they don't have a kingdom on earth.
On earth.
On earth. So so I think let's conclude this program today, and please send in your questions, more questions, and we will be discussing about the contemporary subjects and the finding answers. And I like to know about, we have a book. There are 2 books, I think.
We have several books about the Christian and the weapons.
And I like to request you next program, and Sister, as you are the publishing leader of our organization, I like you to show our viewers that we received some letters and some emails from different personalities, like thank you very much for introducing books to us, because we understand now we have many answers in these books we want to read, and they wanted to buy, and please explain to us next
Yes,
week
for sure.
that what are the books available on this subject for us to understand more,
Yes.
and who were the authors, and I think one book is from Brother Antonino Di Franca. Two books, okay.
Right.
And we are trying to find some answers, some questions we have, find answers from the author of these books.
Yes.
And Brother Antonino Di Franca, due to his health situation, I don't think he may be able to join us live for this program, but still we will find answers from him, and we will send the questions to him, and he has told that, okay, send me the questions and I will get the answers, and maybe we can deal with the answers and the questions next week.
Perfect.
So before we conclude today's program, I'd like to invite you, Sister Raquel, please lead us in prayer.
Thank you. Our Father in heaven, we are so thankful that you are our peace, that you have given to us the peace of heaven, and that we can be partakers of the kingdom of heaven. By your sacrifice and by your intercession for us, help us, Lord, to enjoy this peace, to be part of this wonderful fruit of the Spirit that you are willing to share with us and that we can transfer to others. Take out from us every sense of fruits of the flesh that separated us for these ideal and divine prospects that you have for us. Help us to live here now as citizens of the kingdom of heaven, and help us to fulfill the duty as your church to share this message around the world. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much for joining us today for today's program, and I hope it is much more informative, interesting, and you may have more questions. Please send us the questions. And Sister Raquel, thank you very much for participation. And until we see each other next week on another Q&A program, God bless you. God be with you.
Amen.
Amen.